All right, Shalom. I want to start off by giving our praise, honor, and glory due to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakakwadash. I'd like to give double honors unto the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone, who I learned this truth from. And I'd like to say peace and salutations unto the hopefully elect. And today is Monday, February 2nd, 2026, Missile Monday. And I have this article from theconversation.com. And it says, the only remaining U.S.-Russia nuclear treaty expires this week. Could a new arms race soon accelerate? So I'm just going to go into this article and bring out a few scriptures. Lord willing, this lesson is edifying and straight to the point. And I was reading an article a little earlier, that pretty much, spoke on, the same thing, but they were saying, could there be peace talks? But there's not going to be any peace talks. But the New START treaty, that was signed almost 16 years ago, is set to expire, Thursday. So we'll see, what happens. So it says the New START treaty, the last remaining agreement constraining Russia and U.S. nuclear weapons, is due to lapse on February 4th. There are no negotiations to extend the terms of the treaty either, as U.S. President Donald Trump said dismissively in a recent interview. If it expires, it expires. So, right, man, there aren't going to be any, peace agreements between, Russia and the United States, because they're saying, could a new arms race, begin? Well, an arms race, it never stopped, to be honest with you, it never stopped between Russia and the United States. Now, they may have limited, the amount of weapons that they could possess or, develop, but an arms race between these two nations never really stopped. So continuing, it says, the importance of the New START treaty is hard to overstate, as other nuclear treaties have been abrogated in recent years. This was the only deal left with notification, inspection, verification, and treaty compliance mechanisms between Russia and the U.S. Between them, they possess 80%, 87% of the world's nuclear weapons. Are right, which is biblical prophecy, because these two nations, Russia and the United States, both possess the most, missiles or warheads in particular, between all of the nuclear armed nations, they have the most. Those two, and Russia has more than America, and you can look it up. America has about, over 5,000 or so, and Russia has about, 6,000, a little over 6,000, warheads or missiles. So, it's real. It says the demise of the treaty will bring a new, definitive, and alarming end to nuclear restraint between the two powers. It may very well accelerate to the global nuclear arms race too, and it will, because again, as long as there's no limitations, then guess what? Not just Russia, but the other nations as well are going to be upping, their nuclear arsenal, man. They're going to be putting their resources toward building up their military and also funneling, their resources into their different nuclear programs. So it says, with its New START, the New START or Prague Treaty was signed by then President Barack Obama and his Russian counterpart Dmitry Medvedev in Prague on April 8th, 2010. It entered into force the following year. It superseded a 2002 treaty that obligated Russia and the United States to reduce their operationally deployed strategic nuclear warheads to between 1,700 and 2,200 by the end of 2012. The New START Treaty called for further reductions on long-range nuclear weapons and provided greater specificity about different types of launchers. The new limits were 700 deployed intercontinental and submarine launched ballistic missiles, together with heavy bombers, 1,550 nuclear warheads deployed on those platforms, and 800 launchers, both deployed and non-deployed. These reductions were these reductions were achieved by February 5th, 2018. It says the treaty included mechanisms for compliance and verification, which have worked effectively. It provided for twice yearly exchanges of data and ongoing mutual notification about the movement of strategic nuclear forces, which in practice occurred on a nearly daily basis. Importantly, the treaty also mandated short notice on-site inspections of missiles, warheads, and launchers covered by the treaty, providing valuable and stabilizing insights into the other's nuclear deployments. Lastly, the treaty established a bilateral consultative commission and clear procedures to resolve questions or disputes. Since limitations on the deal, the treaty was criticized at the time for its modest reductions and the limited types of nuclear weapons it covered. It says, but the most enduring downside was the political price Obama paid to achieve ratification by the U.S. Senate. To secure sufficient Republican support, he agreed to a long-term program of renewal and modernization of the entire U.S. nuclear arsenal, in addition to the facilities and programs that produce and maintain nuclear weapons. The overall price tag was estimated to reach well over $2 trillion. This has arguably done more harm by entrenching the United States' possession of nuclear weapons and thwarting prospects for disarmament. As the New START Treaty was about to expire in 2021, Russia offered to extend it for another 5 years. As allowed under the terms, U.S. President Donald Trump, however, refused to reciprocate. After winning the 2020 U.S. presidential election, Joe Biden did agree to extend the treaty on February 3rd, 2021, just 2 days before it would have expired. The treaty does not provide for any further extensions. In February 2023, Russia suspended its implementation of key aspects of the treaty, including stockpile data exchange and on-site inspections. It did not formally withdraw, however, and committed to continue to abide by the treaty's numerical limits on warheads, missiles, and launchers. So let's read a little bit more and then that'll be it. I'm not going to read the whole article, but I'll leave it in the description box for those that want to check it out. It says what can happen next. It says with the imminent expiry of the treaty this year, Russian President Vladimir Putin announced in September 2025 that he was prepared to continue observing the numerical limits for 1 year if the U.S. acted similarly. Besides an off the cuff comment by Trump, it sounds like a good idea to me. The U.S. did not formally respond to the Russian offer. Trump has further complicated matters by insisting that negotiations on any future nuclear arms control agreements could include China. However, China has consistently refused this. There is also no precedent for such trilateral nuclear control or disarmament negotiations, which would no doubt be long and complex. Though growing, China's arsenal is still less than 12%. The size of the U.S. arsenal is the size of the U.S. arsenal and less than 11% of the size of Russia's. The New START Treaty now looks to set the New START Treaty now looks set to expire without any agreement to continue to observe its limits until a successor treaty is negotiated. This means Russia and the U.S. could increase their deployment warheads by 60% and 110% respectively within a matter of months. This is because both have the capacity to load a larger number of warheads on their missiles and bombers than they currently do. Both countries also have large numbers of warheads in reserve or slated for dismantlement, but still intact. If they took these steps, both countries could effectively double their deployed strategic nuclear arsenals. The end of the treaty's verification, data exchanges, and compliance and notification processes would also lead to increased uncertainty and distrust. This, in turn, could lead to a further buildup of both countries' already gargantuan military capabilities. And right, man, I'm just going to leave the rest of this article, and I'll actually just finish it, still leave it in the description box. It says an ominous warning. It says the most unsettling part of this development, it means nuclear disarmament and even more modest arms control is now moribund. No new negotiations for disarmament or even reducing nuclear risks are currently underway. None are scheduled to begin. At a minimum, after New START expires this week, both Russia and the United States should agree to stick to its limits until they negotiate further reductions. And 56 years after making a binding commitment in the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty to achieve nuclear disarmament, both nations should work to implement a verifiable agreement among all nuclear-armed states to eliminate their nuclear arsenals. But Russia, the U.S., and other nuclear-armed nations, other nuclear-armed states, are moving in the opposite direction. Trump's actions since taking office a second time, from bombing Iran to toppling Venezuela's leader, show his general disdain for international law and treaties. They also affirm his desire to use any instrument of power to assert U.S. and his personal interests and supremacy. Putin, meanwhile, has used a It's like it has used of a nuclear capable intermediate range ballistic missile to strike Ukraine, made repeated threats to use nuclear weapons against Kyiv and the West, and continued his unprecedented and profoundly dangerous weaponization of Ukraine's nuclear power plants. It says these moves signal a more aggressive Russian stance that rides roughshod over the UN Charter as well. All of this bodes ill for preventing nuclear war and making progress on nuclear disarmament. So, right, man, so this treaty is going to expire on Thursday, but it's not going to stop anything, man, because again, even if they do come up with a treaty, it's not going to stop these different nations from, deploying their warheads, because we're in a time of war, when we're starting to see these different nations come up against America, and that's the time that we're in, where we're going to see Revelation, the 17th chapter, take place, where these different nations, even America's own allies, being angry at her, and aiding in that destruction, during World War III, and my personal belief, is just me speaking as a man. I believe that, there's not going to be another agreement, that's exactly what the United States and Russia are going to do. They're going to increase, their nuclear warheads, their different payloads on these missiles, so let's just say, they have one missile that may be able to hold, what, let's say 5 warheads, now they may increase it to, 8, 9, hell, 10, warheads at a time. But that's what the New START treaty was, them limiting, the nuclear weapons that they had deployed, but now with this expiring, and if what, Trump said, he just pretty much, he doesn't care, if it expires, it expires, his words, so he's not looking to, start, or come to an agreement with Russia about their, nuclear programs and what they have going on, but it's beautiful because we know that we're that much closer to the great day of the Lord, aka World War III, taking place, So again, I'm going to leave this article in the description box, and I'm just going to grab a few scriptures, and that'll be it. So I'm going to start with the book of Zephaniah chapter 1 and verse 14. It says, "The great day of the Lord is near. It is near and hasteth greatly, even the voice of the day of the Lord. The mighty man shall cry there bitterly." And right, man, the day of the Lord, aka World War III, is on the way, and we can see it. The signs are all there, but as we know, World War III will not come to pass until, the mark of the beast, which is spoken of in Revelation, the 13th chapter, verse 16, to 18, the mass implementation of the RFID microchip, which again is the mark of the beast, is made mandatory, and the majority of people in the world get it, primarily here in America, because it is going to be a global thing, but we know that, again, it hasteth, man. It hasteth, greatly, because we can see it. This place is on its way out of here, probably sooner than we believe. In verse 15, it says, "That day is a day of wrath, a day of trouble and distress, a day of wasteness and desolation, a day of darkness and gloominess, a day of clouds and thick darkness, a day of the trumpet and alarm." It's like, a day of the trumpet and alarm against the fenced cities and against the high towers, and what is it going into, man? Again, World War III, and it's going to come to Babylon, man. America, Babylon the Great, because Babylon is slated for destruction, And that's what's going to happen. And if they don't come to an agreement, which again, I don't think they are, you know, that's exactly what they're going to do. They're going to increase, their nuclear arsenal just to come up against this place, and that's what they're going to do. So let's get the book of Isaiah, chapter 9 and verse 5. And it says, "For every battle of the warrior is with confused noise and garments rolled in blood. But this shall be with burning and fuel of fire and right, man." This isn't going to be, like traditional warfare. This is going to be fought. This coming world war is going to be fought with these nuclear missiles. And as I always make mention, you will have ground troops that are going to be going to war with each other. Because again, it is still going to be, troops from different nations, America, Russia, China, North Korea. The Lord is going to gather them all together. Just like it says, in Joel, the 3rd chapter, the Lord is going to gather the nations, in the valley of Jehoshaphat, or in the Hebrew, Yahweh Shaphat. He's going to gather them together, to judge them, But this war is primarily going to be fought with these nuclear missiles, which is why they're on the earth, and which is why also these missiles that are on the earth have the capability of destroying the planet Earth, But as it says in the scriptures, the earth abideth forever, so the entire planet Earth won't be destroyed, but certain lands will, as we know, the 2 confirmed lands that are going to get hit, America is going to get hit and be left completely desolate. The land of Israel will be hit, but it will be built back up, and I personally believe other lands, may get hit as well, but, we'll just have to wait and see, So, I'm in Isaiah. I'm going to jump to Isaiah chapter 13 and verse 4. It says, "The noise of a multitude in the mountains, like as of a great people, a tumultuous noise of the kingdoms of nations gathered together. The Lord of hosts musters the hosts of the battle. They come from a far country, from the end of heaven, even the Lord and the weapons of his indignation to destroy the whole land." And right, that noise that is talking about, the noise in the mountains, is going to be the missiles when they're launched, man, because you're going to hear them before you see them, because they're going to make that loud noise, which is going to be that, rocket propulsion system, or, that jetpack that is going to be guiding them to their targets, man, because there's going to be so many of them, you're going to hear them. It's going to make a great noise, and that's that, tumultuous noise. And just like it's described in, Joel, the 2nd chapter, sounds like, horses, running, Same thing John says, in the book of Revelation, the 9th chapter, describing, the missiles, man. They're going to be like, horses, because there's going to be so many of them. They're going to cover the sky, because again, just like it says, they come from a far country. So missiles going to be launched, just speaking of Russia alone, because I believe they're going to be launched from, they are going to be launched from different countries, obviously, but, they're going to be launched from different angles is what I'm trying to say, so missiles are going to come from Russia, China, North Korea, they're going to be launched from all over, instead of just coming from, one particular direction is, what I'm getting at, they're going to come from all over, primarily from the east, and they're going to pelt this place, because what does it say? It says they come from a far country from one end of heaven to the other, man. So they'll be launched from the east and they're going to land in the west, in particular North America, Because like it says, to destroy the whole land, this entire land mass is going to be destroyed. Nothing is going to be left here besides what? Desert creatures after, that fire, finally goes out. Because Isaiah, the 34th chapter, gives a vivid description of how America is going to look after this destruction takes place, man. This land will never be inhabited by man again, because it's going to be left as an example of how not to live, just like Sodom and Gomorrah. Ancient Sodom and Gomorrah was left as a memorial of how not to live. Well, America is going to be that, this place will never be, built up again. This place will never be inhabited again, man. And it's going to be the Lord's, one of the Lord's greatest works in this time, man, destroying Babylon, and delivering the elect, from out of this land. So let me see. Let's get a couple more. That'll be it. Didn't want to make this one too long. Get the book of Malachi, chapter 4, and verse 1. And it says, "For behold, the day cometh that shall burn as an oven, and all the proud, yea, and all that do wickedly shall be stubble, and the day that cometh shall burn them up, saith the Lord of hosts, that it shall leave them neither root nor branch." And right, man, the great day of the Lord is coming. It's coming. That's the day that is going to burn as an oven. And just like it says in, 2 Peter, the 3rd chapter, man, this place is going to be melted, with fervent heat, man. That extreme heat, is going to melt this place, melt the elements, man. Because these missiles are going to burn extremely hot, like literally, man. Because the sun itself burns at, or at least the center of the sun burns at 15 million degrees Celsius. These warheads, once they detonate, they're going to burn at 100 million degrees Celsius, man. That is extremely hot, man. That's that fervent heat, that Peter was talking about, man. And a lot of people are going to feel that heat, man. And it's no joke. These nukes are going to burn hotter than the sun. And this is what we're hoping to be delivered from. I myself, I'm hoping to be delivered from this destruction that the Lord is getting ready to bring upon this place, man. Because that's a scary thing. Yes, it's exciting, but it's scary at the same time. Exciting because, we know the end of this place. We're finally going to be able to get out of here, man. The Lord is going to avenge us. But it all comes down to if we're of the elect, man. Because if we're not of the, if you're not of the elect, then you're not going to make it out of here, Because as we know, the majority of our people, the 2/3 of Israel, they're going to be destroyed in that fashion by being burned alive, man. And this is what we're hoping to escape the Lord's judgment, So I'm going to get the book of Revelation, chapter 9 and verse 12. And it says, "One woe is past, and behold, there come there come two woes more hereafter." All right, World War I came to pass from 1915, to 1919, and then it says what? Two more woes more hereafter. So let's jump to Revelation, chapter 11 and verse 14. It says, "The second woe is past, and behold, the third woe cometh quickly." And right, World War II came to pass, from 1939 to 1945, which how was World War II ended? When America dropped those bombs on Japan, the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, to be exact. This year in August, it'll be 81 years since that incident took place, man. And the Japanese has not forgotten what America has done. They have not forgotten. But what, just like it said, the third woe cometh quickly, and we're seeing it. The third woe is coming very quickly, man, because again, these nations are gearing up for war. They're getting ready to come against America, and who better than DT to have in office, to make these different nations angry, to bring about World War III, So I'm going to end it with this. This is the book of Revelation, chapter 9 and verse 15. It says, "And the four angels were loosed, which were prepared for an hour and a day and a month and a year, for to slay the third part of men." And right when you go back to the book of Revelation, the 7th chapter, it speaks of, the four angels, which these are four literal angels, that are holding back the four winds, which the four winds represent the destruction that is going to take place here in Babylon the Great, aka America, And then when you read in here, it says that the angels were loosed. So there's a particular time, there's a set time, a particular hour, day, month, and year, when this destruction is going to take place, when the Lord is going to give those angels the green light to unleash this destruction. There's a set time when the Heavenly Father wants all of this to take place, and we're just waiting for it to, come to pass. And it's like it says, to slay the third part of men, because you have three classes of men on the earth. You have the sons of God, which today are known as the biblical Israelites, you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, from the tribe of Judah all the way down to the tribe of Issachar. Then you have the sons of men, which are the different heathen nations. And then you have the sons of the wicked, which is the nation of Edom, you so-called white people. You're the third part of men, the wicked. That's what this destruction is for. It's for you, for the atrocities that you have done, to the children of Israel, and what you have done to the earth, man. You're literally destroyed the planet Earth, and this destruction of you people is going to be great, man, because it's not just for you, it's primarily for you, but, 2/3 of the nation of Israel is going to get caught up in this destruction, for their wickedness, for not wanting to turn back to the Lord and to get right when they had the chance to. And then as always, man, you different heathen nations that aren't able to, escape back into your homeland or to leave, Babylon before this destruction takes place. You're just collateral damage. You're just over here to make a little money and die when that time comes, But World War III, aka the day of the Lord, that destruction that is getting ready to come upon Babylon, is for you Edomites, man. You 2/3 and you heathen nations. It's for you, but it's primarily for Esau. So, Lord willing, this lesson was edifying. I want to give all praise, honor, and glory due to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakakodash. I'd like to give divine honors unto the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone, who are led this truth from, and like to say peace and salutations unto the hopefully elect. Till next time I say, Shalom.